Welcome back, everybody. Derrick Soo, your East Oakland advocate. Well, one of my followers, viewers, has sent me uh, something that was pretty interesting. And a lot of you know that I am pretty well informed on the cannabis issue. And so, anyway, this is kind of related to cannabis, but it's not because um, in this case, uh, Dr. Phil, all of you know Dr. Phil, he claims that cannabis causes mental illness. And I respect Dr. Phil. Number one, that he holds the title of doctor. He's a psychologist, but he's not an expert. And all he's doing is upholding old white man's, greedy white man's beliefs that cannabis is harmful and destructive to the human mind. And here's where Dr. Phil and we clash. And this right now, it doesn't matter if this gets monetized or not by YouTube. In most cases, things that I mentioned, cannabis, YouTube is going to censor me and not allow me to make any money. But I don't care. This is an important point because Dr. Phil is spreading misinformation. Yes, I said it. Dr. Phil, you are spreading misinformation because you have no fucking clue as to what is truly going on in the cannabis medical world. Truly, you don't know. And yes, you hold a doctor's degree in psychology, and you can make assumptions, but you have not provided a shred of evidence that cannabis in any form creates mental illness. There are a lot of things in this world that creates mental illness. And in fact, I'm going to talk about my personal experience dating back to when I was a teenager in high school. That is when I first started using cannabis. And so I'm going to attack his claims that mental illness starts at a young age when people start smoking cannabis at, at a young age. Well, I did it in high school. I was 16. Uh, Everybody was smoking cannabis. It was probably some of the easiest stuff to get hold of, and in my opinion, it was much safer than alcohol. Alcohol uh, does a lot of things and makes you really stupid, also. Whereas cannabis is more it's a it is a stimulant, but it's more of a downer type stimulant, and so it relaxes you. And so my argument, number one, I was married to my wife for 23 years, and she held, or she was a double master's in psychology. She had completed her internship here in the state of California, was on the threshold of getting her doctor's degree and being a doctor. But then she decided that these mental patients were so sick that she didn't want to go into psychology, and so she went into pharmacology, bioscience, and so it's one of the things that came up in one of our conversations between my wife and I was, why is the pharmaceutical industry so against cannabis? And there's so many proven benefits from cannabis, but why? And she said, number one, here's the bottom line: nothing that is derived from cannabis, no chemicals, no compound, no element from cannabis can be patented by anyone because it is a natural stimulant. It is a natural stimulant. And so this goes all the way back to Howard Hughes. He was a very wealthy businessman. Everybody knows the name. He had held many patents. And one of the things that he couldn't do was patent any compound or element from cannabis. And so he said that the cannabis has no medical value because he couldn't gain a patent for anything. While things had great benefits and great promise, he couldn't get a patent, and so he didn't. He decided to deem it worthless. No medical value. Howard Hughes, he's not even a doctor, but this was, you know, at a time way back in the 20s and 30s, and how things were done was very different. And so he created the first false narrative that cannabis has no medical value whatsoever. No medical value, meaning that none of its compounds, none of its elements, nothing will have any medicinal value from now or into the future. And the government followed that because, hey, he's a multi-millionaire. He knows what he's doing. He holds patents. And so that's how it started out, a false narrative, because Howard Hughes couldn't turn a profit. He couldn't get a patent on any of the compounds that were very beneficial. And so that's how he kept promoting that. And then the politicians were saying, well, okay, if it has no medical value, then we should ban it. We should make it illegal to possess. And for the longest time, up until that point, marijuana was readily available up through the 30s. It was everywhere. But to Howard Hughes, he couldn't isolate a profit from it, just like a lot of the other things that he did throughout his lifetime and in business. And so that's how it became a Schedule 1A drug. And here's my argument to the opposite of Howard Hughes, is that number one, I started using cannabis when I was 16, back in 1976 in high school. I knew a lot of growers back then, and a lot of these people were hippies, and in Berkeley, and they still exist today. And these were the smart growers of my time, and they had built up a certain clientele, and that's all they service. They don't service outside of their clientele list unless somebody dies or leaves, and then they find a replacement, a single replacement for that one replacement. It's a one-for-one replacement. So it's not like they're growing a business or anything. And these strains have been around since the 70s, and so that's why I know these folks, and I use it myself for medicinal because of my cancer. And there's a lot of support in cancer research right now for the benefits of using cannabis. CBD has been the big buzzword for years right now. CBD, because it has no psychotropic properties in it, and so, but it does have a lot of beneficial elements. It helps the young children with epilepsy. It nearly stops their epileptic seizures. If you've never seen a person in a full grand mal, it is terrifying. It is scary, and the only thing that you can really do is to try and hold them down so that they don't hurt themselves, and that they don't swallow their tongue. That's the two most important things in the event of a grand mal seizure, somebody having epilepsy. But cannabis has CBD. That's one of the cannabinoids of marijuana, cannabis, and so it relaxes the nerves. It works on our natural sensors that we have built into our bodies, and so it's not a chemical that changes our chemical makeup. It works on the different receptors throughout our bodies. It's like a mRNA, and so it has its own chemicals, but these chemicals are reactive by certain receptors in our bodies, and by using the different cannabinoids or the and the THCs, we can develop cures for cancers. Right now, there's been incredible breakthroughs for cancer research. I was part of the National Cancer Research Study on colon cancer for 5 years, and they followed me through my the actual diagnoses, the treatment, and the aftercare up to 5 years. And throughout the entire period, my oncologist supported me with the cannabis, and in fact, he encouraged me to get my. At the time, I needed a cannabis medical card, and so he signed off on that, and it allowed me to get cannabis as medical. And it, let me tell you, if you've ever been through cancer treatment, it can be a very horrible experience, or it can be not so bad. Mine was not so bad because uh, I didn't use the anti-nausea medicine that was prescribed by my oncologist. In fact, he said, only use this if it's really bad. I would encourage you to use the cannabis before this. And so that's what I did. And throughout the entire treatment, which lasted, let's see, the radiation and chemo, that lasted 90 days, or April, May, June. Yeah, 90 days, because it started right at the end of April, and it followed me all the way up to July. And in July 8th, I went in and had my surgery for my colon cancer, which removed the cancer. But a lot of the things that I had medications for, some of the symptoms showed up, and I first treated uh, uh, medicinally with the cannabis, and, and because number one, it's a natural remedy. Number two, even the doctors warned me of the side effects of the anti-nausea medications and some of the other medications that went along during the treatment. And my best alternative and most holistic was using cannabis. And my doctor and all the doctors that were following me through this were really interested in the fact that, number one, I never got sick. I was never nauseated, even though the symptoms came on. But when I used cannabis in place of the anti-nausea medication, I didn't get sick. I actually recovered very quickly. I never lost any hair. My hair didn't turn colors or fall out. My taste buds did change. There were a lot of physical changes and changes in my body that were due to the chemo, and even lost feeling in my feet, and for a while my fingers. And while I got off of all of those medications, and they diminished in my body over the next year, feeling it was restored back to my fingers, and most of it, some of it, I should say, not all of it, but probably a good 50% of it has been restored to my feet. But then also, I had PTSD, and so Dr. Phil, says that mental illness. Cannabis causes mental illness. How can that be? Because PTSD is caused by other forces, but yet we have cannabis, which is prescribed by many doctors as a way to deal with the PTSD. In fact, that's how I dealt with my PTSD while I was homeless, because I was also smoking. For number two, it made me hungry. The cannabis made me hungry, whereas the chemo, I could go for a whole week without eating, and I literally did once, and that's because I had some difficulty getting some medical marijuana at the time, and so anyway, I had lost significant weight, and my doctor uh, was going to prescribe to me medications that would make me hungry. Again, there are side effects with that and some real negatives. And I said, no. And even he said, I would prefer you to try the medical marijuana before taking these other pills to make you hungry. Because if the medical marijuana will deal with your hunger or make you hungry and make you eat, that's much better. It's a better way rather than having the side effects of the medications that would make me hungry. So, and then also, there were a lot of stressful times where my PTSD was triggered out on the street while I was living homeless. And I had learned by that time that the cannabis helped calm the effects of the PTSD, the anxiety. It calmed it, and there's a lot of good things with some of the psychotropic elements, the THCs, in cannabis, and that's what helped reduce my anxiety and my stress, because it acts as a downer, and so it calms you, and it has a very calming effect. And so the other thing is that he says Dr. Phil says it's a contributor to crime, and there depends on where you get your information. Dr. Phil, you're partially right on this. There's a lot of crime around cannabis, especially the thieves and the cannabis illegal growers and things. That's the crime. The crime isn't the cannabis. It's kind of like the gun. The gun is something that's there and it does nothing. It's an inanimate object. Cannabis, an animated object, but it's inanimate. And crime revolves around a lot of different things. Crime revolves around alcohol, so you can't say that cannabis is largely responsible for anything. And then there's the issue of Dr. Phil saying people overdose. Well, can you show me any documentation where somebody actually overdosed on cannabis, whether smoking or eating? It's extremely rare because this is a natural herb, and it works on the body's receptors. It does not change you chemically. It does not introduce a chemical that, like alcohol, which chemically changes your brain function and your nervous system. Cannabis does not do that in that same manner. It changes it in the form that it works on your receptors, your natural body receptors. And so it calms you that way. It relieves pain. CBD relieves pain, and that can be pain relief topically by applying CBD to the surface or by ingesting it, for headaches, migraines, and migraine research has been incredible with cannabis right now. And right now, a majority of the country, over 38% of the country, supports cannabis to be legalized. There are some holdouts, but those are are probably the Republicans who are mad, just like Howard Hughes, that they can't turn a profit. But yet they are turning a profit because they're killing the industry right now. I mean, you look at how the industry was structured from the beginning, you could see that the politicians and the people in charge really didn't want to see this industry, this fledgling industry, succeed, and they still don't. And that's why we have a problem, a criminal problem with cannabis. It's not through the legal means, it's because of the way that things are structured. And it was wrong to tax and regulate, so over-regulate the industry in the beginning. And then the taxation is ridiculous. You know, a person can go out and buy a lid of 420 easily on the street anywhere, not have to pay any taxes. They go into a dispensary. Yeah, the dispensary, your cannabis is going to be a little better there, or actually quite a bit better, because you have no idea of the quality and there's no testing on street cannabis, whereas in the dispensaries, it is verified for potency. So those are some of the differences. Dr. Phil, you're absolutely off base and wrong on this. It does not cause mental illness. In fact, it cures mental illness, and it helps a person manage their mental illness in a fashion that is not harmful. And again, I would like to see any evidence of somebody overdosing on the actual product, because I've known people who have actually overdosed. In fact, some of the earliest edibles were so potent that it was incredible. And I say that in the fact that I bought a brownie for a friend. That friend didn't follow the instructions. He ate the whole thing. It was 10, that was 10 doses. 10 doses that he ate at one time in that one brownie. That was 1,000 milligrams of THC. Yeah, that was a lot. And before it took effect, he was actually a little scared, paranoid. And I looked at him. I said, well, there's two choices. Either you could cough it up or run it through. And I told him, I said, nobody's ever died from having too much cannabis, because it doesn't work chemically. It doesn't change your body chemically. It works on receptors. And these receptors that it worked on my friend made him sleep for 3 days. And that's all it did. When he finally came back around on the third day, he was a little mad at everything still, because he had lost 3 days. And then he was still high on the third day. He was still high. But then here's the bottom line. He seriously overdosed. For 72 hours, he slept it off. 1,000 milligrams in a single sitting. 1,000 milligrams in a single sitting. And he lived just fine. Scared him. He never touched an edible ever again after that. He did smoke cannabis, but he got over it. I myself, I overdosed once on canna butter. I used to make my own canna butter. Had it on crackers. Ate too much because it's so good. And I literally paralyzed myself for 2 hours. I couldn't move. Then when it wore off, I was just fine. Did it cause me any mental anguish? No, other than not being able to do anything for 2 hours, which was pretty chill. But I don't know anybody that has died without some sort of underlying issues, an allergy perhaps to one of the cannabinoids, but it's extremely, extremely rare that anybody dies from overdosing on cannabis. And Dr. Phil, you're wrong. It does not cause mental illness. It does help with a lot of things mentally, PTSD being one of the most important ones. And we're finding more and more research is being done using cannabis for PTSD. Uh, and it doesn't cause mental illness. In fact, it's alleviating, and people are finding comfort using cannabis for PTSD and many mental illnesses. It doesn't make people violent, doesn't change your brain chemistry. You know, the effects, you know, work on your body's natural receptors. Your natural receptors. Doesn't change anything chemically in your brain like alcohol. Dr. Phil, you're wrong. And if you have any doubts, hey, get in touch with me. We can have a good debate. Thanks for joining me, everybody. We'll be right back.